Improve your English through stories. Long ago, in England, every town had a special house for very poor people. Oliver Twist, a little baby, was born in one of these houses called a workhouse. His mother, a young woman, was very sick when she arrived at the workhouse. The doctor and a woman were by her side. After Oliver was born, his mother, weak and ill, expressed her last wish. She said, "I want to see my baby and then die." The woman tried to console her, saying she was too young to die. The doctor gently placed the little baby in his mother's arms. She kissed Oliver and sadly passed away. The doctor declared, "She's dead," and the woman remarked, "Poor dear, she came here last night. No one knows where she's from." As the old woman dressed the baby in worn-out clothes, Oliver was left alone in the world. He became an orphan, and no one loved him. Living in an orphanage with other children, they had little food and even less love. Many children in the orphanage died due to cold and hunger. Though Oliver survived, he remained small and thin with a very white face. On his 9th birthday, Oliver left the orphanage, bidding farewell to his only friends. He went to live in a workhouse, where he worked long hours. The workhouse provided him with meager meals: one bowl of porridge 3 times a day and an onion twice a week, with a small piece of bread on Sundays. Oliver and his companions were always hungry and unhappy. They never dared to ask for more porridge, fearing punishment. After 3 months, their hunger became unbearable, and one day, Oliver mustered the courage to ask for more porridge. The master was surprised and called Mr. Bumble, an important officer of the town. Mr. Bumble took Oliver to the directors of the workhouse, reporting that Oliver Twist asked for more porridge. The directors were shocked and decided that Oliver must leave the workhouse. Mr. Bumble placed Oliver in a cold, dark room for 1 week. Every morning, he beat Oliver with a stick in front of his friends. Oliver cried all day and couldn't sleep at night. One day, Mr. Bumble met Mr. Sowerberry, who made coffins for dead bodies. Mr. Bumble offered Oliver to work in Mr. Sowerberry's shop without pay, and they would give £5. Mr. Sowerberry agreed, and Oliver, tearfully looking at Mr. Bumble, expressed his desire to be a good boy, despite feeling very lonely. Upon arriving at Mr. Sowerberry's shop, Mr. Bumble reported, "Here is the boy." After examining Oliver, Mr. Sowerberry called his wife and remarked, "This boy is very small." Mrs. Sowerberry acknowledged, "Yes, he is small," adding, "But children grow, and children cost a lot of money." Noticing the absence of the dog that night, Mrs. Sowerberry told Oliver, "The dog isn't here, so you can eat his food." She then provided Oliver with some cold pieces of meat. Oliver quickly consumed the dog's food, and Mrs. Sowerberry directed him, saying, "Come with me. Your bed is in the shop, and you can sleep here with the coffins. Good night." That night, surrounded by numerous coffins, Oliver felt sad and afraid in this unfamiliar place. The next morning, a noise outside the shop caught Oliver's attention. The door opened, revealing a big boy with small eyes and a red nose. The boy introduced himself, stating, "I'm Mr. Noah Claypole. You work under me. Open the windows immediately." Noah, proving to be more of an enemy than a friend, tormented Oliver by pulling his hair and ears. Funerals became a frequent part of Oliver's routine as Mr. Sowerberry assigned him the role of a mourner. Mr. Sowerberry asked Oliver if he liked funerals, and Oliver replied, "Not very much, sir." One day, after Noah insulted Oliver's mother, Oliver retaliated by beating Noah, surprising everyone with his courage. Mrs. Sowerberry and a servant intervened, punishing Oliver and locking him in a dark room. Noah ran to fetch Mr. Bumble, claiming Oliver tried to kill him. Upon Mr. Bumble's arrival, Oliver pleaded to be let out, and when recognized, Mr. Bumble asked if he was afraid. Oliver bravely replied, "No," surprising Mr. Bumble. Mr. Bumble attributed Oliver's behavior to the meat Mrs. Sowerberry had given him, comparing it to the porridge at the workhouse. Mr. Sowerberry, upon returning home, also punished Oliver but forgot to lock the door that night. Taking advantage of the oversight, Oliver packed a few clothes in a handkerchief and quietly left Mr. Sowerberry's shop early the next morning. Oliver, uncertain of his destination, walked for an extended period, growing very tired. He eventually sat down on a milestone to rest. The milestone indicated that London was 70 miles away, and Oliver thought, "Mr. Bumble can't find me in London." Encouraged, he resumed walking, covering 20 miles on the first day, surviving on just a piece of bread and some water. At night, he slept by the roadside. As days passed, Oliver's strength dwindled. A kind man and a poor old lady offered him some food, sustaining him. On the 7th day, exhausted, Oliver reached a small town near London. A strange boy with big ears and little eyes approached him, asking what was wrong. Oliver shared his sad story, and the boy, introducing himself as Dodger, offered help. Dodger took Oliver to an inn, where he enjoyed a meal and felt better. Dodger then suggested staying with him, mentioning an old man in London who could provide shelter. Grateful, Oliver accepted Dodger's assistance. The two boys walked to London, arriving late at night. Dodger led Oliver through the city's small, dirty streets, finally stopping in front of an old black house. They went inside, climbing broken stairs, and entered a dark, dirty room. There, they encountered a group of young boys and an ugly old man with red hair and a beard named Fagan. Fagan welcomed Oliver, offering him sausages and a warm place to sleep. The next morning, as Oliver woke up late, Fagan prepared coffee. Unaware that Oliver was awake, Fagan opened a secret box containing beautiful watches and splendid jewels. Upon realizing Oliver was awake, Fagan quickly closed the box, displaying annoyance. Fagan scolded Oliver for being awake, claiming the valuables were all he had. After instructing Oliver to wash his face, Dodger and his friend Charlie Bates arrived, and they all had breakfast. Fagan inquired if the boys had worked that morning, and they presented wallets and handkerchiefs as evidence of their activities. After breakfast, Fagan and the two boys engaged in a peculiar game. The old man placed a wallet, a watch, some money, and handkerchiefs in his pocket, then walked around the room with the boys following him. At times, he stopped, pretending to look at a shop window or talk to a friend. The boys swiftly moved, taking things from his pockets, and Fagan either praised their success or urged them to try again. Oliver watched, finding it amusing, and eventually expressed his desire to join the game. Fagan allowed Oliver to play, and soon, he became adept at the game. Fagan complimented him, stating that he was a good boy. When the game concluded, two young ladies, Bet and Nancy, visited Dodger and Charlie Bates. Despite their dirty dresses, Oliver laughed and enjoyed the company. One morning, Fagan suggested Oliver could go out with Dodger and Charlie Bates, and Oliver eagerly agreed. They walked to the market, and suddenly Dodger stopped, whispering for them to be quiet. He pointed out an old man near a bookshop, and the boys quickly stole a handkerchief from his pocket. Realizing the nature of the game and the mystery behind Fagan's watches and jewels, Oliver began to run. The old man noticed his missing handkerchief, and the cry of "Stop thief" rang out. Dodger and Charlie Bates joined the chase, accusing Oliver. The police caught Oliver, but a bystander who worked at the bookshop vouched for his innocence. Oliver was free but weak, and a kind old man named Mr. Brownlow took him to his home in a carriage. Meanwhile, back at Fagan's place, Dodger and Charlie Bates informed Fagan that Oliver had been taken away by the police. Fagan, furious and worried about Oliver revealing their secrets, met with his friend Bill Sikes, a strong and angry man. They devised a plan to find Oliver. When Oliver arrived at Mr. Brownlow's house, he was very ill and almost died. For many days, he lay in a clean bed in the sunny house, where Mrs. Bedwin, Mr. Brownlow's housekeeper, took care of him. A picture of a lady near Oliver's bed caught his attention, and he remarked on her beauty but noticed the sadness in her eyes. Mr. Brownlow, upon seeing Oliver, remarked to Mrs. Bedwin about the striking resemblance between Oliver and the lady in the picture. He looked at Oliver and the picture many times. As Oliver recovered, Mr. Brownlow, with tears in his eyes, sat on a chair near his bed. Over time, Oliver regained his health, and both Mr. Brownlow and Mrs. Bedwin showed him great kindness. Mr. Brownlow even bought him new clothes, bringing happiness to Oliver for the first time in his life. Oliver liked his new home and expressed his happiness to Mr. Brownlow. One day, Mr. Brownlow proposed sending Oliver to a good school so that he could read the books in his library. Oliver happily agreed, and Mr. Brownlow, one sunny day, asked him to take some books to the bookshop along with a £5 note. Oliver gladly accepted the task, expressing his willingness to help. Walking down the street with the books, Oliver encountered Nancy, who, upon seeing him, embraced him as her dear brother. She insisted that he come home with her and Bill Sikes. Bill Sikes arrived, asserting that Oliver should return home with them, as their mother was waiting. They took Oliver to Fagan's shop, where they were welcomed by Fagan. Oliver's new clothes were taken, the £5 note was confiscated, and the books were seized. When Oliver pleaded to return the items to Mr. Brownlow, Fagan and the others mocked him. Oliver attempted to escape, but he was hit with a stick by Fagan and then locked in a dark room. Meanwhile, at Mr. Brownlow's house, he and Mrs. Bedwin anxiously waited for Oliver all night, but he never returned. Mr. Brownlow was deeply saddened and worried about Oliver's whereabouts. One rainy night, Fagan visited Bill Sikes to discuss a plan involving a large house outside London. Fagan was excited about the opportunity to steal many precious items from this wealthy house. Sikes acknowledged the richness of the house but expressed concern about the difficulty of the task since the house was completely closed at night. Fagan proposed a small window at the back that could be easily opened, suggesting that Oliver, due to his size, would be the perfect candidate to enter. The next morning, Oliver found a new pair of shoes near his bed, making him very happy. Fagan instructed him that he must go to see Bill Sikes that night. When Oliver inquired why, Fagan simply stated that Sikes could provide more information. Fagan warned Oliver to be careful, emphasizing Sikes's cruelty and advising him to do whatever Sikes instructed. Oliver, filled with fear, prayed for help. Nancy came to take Oliver to Sikes, advising him to be good and quiet while giving her hand. Upon seeing Oliver, Sykes immediately pointed a pistol at his head, threatening to shoot him if he didn't comply with his orders. Oliver, terrified, obeyed without uttering a word. Sykes and Oliver walked together in the cold fog until they arrived in the countryside, where they met another thief named Toby Crackit. They climbed a wall and saw a big country house. As Oliver realized their terrible plan to commit a burglary, he fell to his knees, pleading not to be part of the crime. Toby Crackit covered Oliver's mouth, and Sykes, holding a pistol, instructed him to enter through a small window, open the front door, and let them inside. Oliver, wanting to warn the family, started going up the stairs. Sykes called him back, and suddenly, there was a light. Oliver saw two men at the top of the stairs, and a pistol shot echoed with smoke. He felt a terrible pain and ran back to the small window. Sykes pulled him through the window, noticing Oliver's injury. In a hurry, Sykes and Toby Crackit left Oliver at the garden wall and ran away, while two men and their dogs, servants of the country house, followed them. The men returned to the house without seeing Oliver's body. Oliver, injured, stayed on the cold, wet ground throughout the night. The next morning, Oliver woke up to the sound of rain, and his left arm was covered with blood. Slowly getting up and attempting to walk, he noticed the country house nearby and thought that the people there might be able to help him. Knocking on the door, Oliver fell to the ground. Mr. Giles and Mr. Brittles opened the door and saw the blood on Oliver's clothes. Mr. Giles immediately identified him as one of the thieves. He suggested showing Oliver to the ladies, and Rose Maylie, a beautiful girl of 17, asked not to see him immediately. They took Oliver upstairs to Mr. Giles's room, and Mr. Brittles was sent to town to fetch Dr. Losburn. Upon Dr. Losburn's arrival, he expressed shock at the terrible event and checked on the ladies' well-being. The doctor examined Oliver upstairs and later asked the ladies to join him. To their surprise, they did not find a criminal but a little boy sleeping in bed. Rose and Mrs. Maylie were moved by Oliver's innocent appearance. In the evening, Oliver woke up and shared the story of his sad life, including the kindness he received from Mr. Brownlow. He spoke slowly and softly due to his weakness and high temperature. Rose and Mrs. Maylie took care of him, and Oliver slowly recovered. He enjoyed walks, music, and reading with them. After 3 months, a kind old man provided him with daily lessons. Oliver expressed his gratitude, and Rose and Mrs. Maylie took him to their country cottage, surrounded by trees and flowers. Oliver became strong and healthy, expressing his love for the peaceful countryside. After 3 months, they returned home. One afternoon, while Oliver was studying at his desk, he saw 2 men at the window, Fagan and another man named Monks. Oliver identified them, and the 2 men quickly ran away. Shouting for Fagan, Oliver alarmed the servants, who rushed to the garden but found no trace of the 2 men. Mr. Bumble was now the master of the workhouse where Oliver was born. One evening, Monks went to talk to him and confirmed his identity. Mr. Bumble, in his role as the master, acknowledged it and listened attentively. Monks then placed 2 gold coins on the table and quickly pocketed them. Monks revealed that he wanted information about a boy born in the workhouse 12 years ago, specifically Oliver Twist. Monks mentioned that Oliver's mother died after giving birth, and Mr. Bumble remembered the incident. Monks further claimed that Mrs. Bumble took something from Oliver's mother, and he demanded a meeting at the old house near the river. The next night, Mr. and Mrs. Bumble met Monks at the designated location. Monks offered Mrs. Bumble £25 in gold, and she handed him a gold wedding ring with the name Agnes inscribed on it. Monks, in anger, threw the ring into the river, ensuring it would not be found. Meanwhile, Bill Sikes fell ill, and Nancy took care of him, revealing her affection for him. One day, Sikes instructed Nancy to ask Fagan for some money. When Nancy went to Fagan's house, Monks arrived to talk to Fagan. Fagan assured Monks that Nancy was trustworthy and took him to another room, leaving Nancy to eavesdrop on their conversation. She overheard disturbing information. Feeling unhappy and determined to help Oliver, Nancy decided to go to a hotel near Hyde Park to talk to Rose Maylie. Monks left Fagan's house, and Fagan, appreciative of Nancy's loyalty, gave her some money. The next day, while Sikes was asleep, Nancy went to the hotel. She shared the troubling information about Monks, Fagan, and their plan to make Oliver a thief. Nancy revealed that Oliver was in danger, and Monks intended to harm his half-brother. She urged Rose to meet her on London Bridge on Sunday night between 11 and midnight to discuss further and save Oliver. Despite Rose's offer of help and money for a new life, Nancy declined, stating it was too late for her. Oliver, eager to see Mr. Brownlow and explain many things, expressed his desire to Rose. Rose agreed and wanted to meet Mr. Brownlow to share Nancy's secret, confident in his goodness. They took a carriage to Mr. Brownlow's house, and when they arrived, Rose asked Oliver to wait for a few minutes. Rose then met Mr. Brownlow in a big sitting room, where she introduced herself as Rose Maylie. She expressed her interest in Oliver Twist and shared details about his kind and loving nature, along with the affection he held for Mr. Brownlow and Mrs. Bedwin. Mr. Brownlow was delighted to hear about Oliver and expressed his great happiness. He eagerly inquired about Oliver's current whereabouts. Rose informed him that Oliver was in the carriage, and Mr. Brownlow eagerly called for him. When Oliver saw Mr. Brownlow and Mrs. Bedwin, he was overjoyed and embraced them, expressing his happiness and the many things he wanted to share. After a while, Rose requested to speak with Mr. Brownlow alone. In the next room, Rose revealed the details of Nancy's visit, describing the cruel nature of Fagan and Sikes. Mr. Brownlow acknowledged the strange mystery and the need to find the man called Monks, who held key information. Rose emphasized that only Nancy could assist them, but they had to wait until Sunday night. Sunday night arrived, and as the clock struck 11, Fagan, Sikes, and Nancy were aware of the time. Nancy decided to go out, put on her hat, and left. Fagan allowed her to go, suggesting that one of his boys could follow her. The night was foggy as Nancy met Rose and Mr. Brownlow on London Bridge. They descended the steps to the river, unaware that Fagan's boy was secretly following and listening to their conversation. Mr. Brownlow explained their intention to help Oliver, seeking information about his mother and father, known only to Monks. Nancy revealed Monks' whereabouts at the Red Lion Hotel in King Street, describing his appearance and a distinctive red mark on his neck. This revelation intrigued Mr. Brownlow, who seemed to recognize Monks. When asked about Fagan and Sikes, Nancy hesitated, unable to provide details. Despite receiving offers of assistance and money, Nancy decided to leave, expressing gratitude, and ran away into the night. Rose and Mr. Brownlow, though sorry for Nancy, returned home in a carriage after the meeting on London Bridge. Monks, Fagan's boy, hurriedly ran to inform Fagan and Sykes about Nancy's betrayal. Fagan, infuriated and terrified of the consequences, contemplated grim thoughts about imprisonment and death. Sykes, consumed by rage, expressed a vehement desire to kill Nancy for her perceived betrayal, as she sought to help Oliver. Determined to escape the grim situation, Sykes rushed to his house where Nancy was sleeping. Upon waking Nancy and expressing his anger, Sykes accused her of betrayal. Nancy pleaded for mercy, insisting that she said nothing about him or Fagan. Desperate to leave the criminal life behind, she proposed escaping together. However, Sykes, driven by fury, repeatedly struck Nancy's face, leading to her death. Covered in blood, Sykes washed himself, changed his clothes, and fled to the countryside with his dog. As news of the gruesome murder spread in London, Sykes, fearing retribution, contemplated returning after a week to eventually escape to France. He decided that, before leaving, he must kill his loyal dog, named Fights. Meanwhile, Mr. Brownlow, Dr. Losburn, and another friend took action. They went to the Red Lion Hotel and abducted Monks, taking him to Miss Maylie's house and locking him in a room. Monks, furious and bewildered, questioned their actions. Mr. Brownlow, revealing his knowledge of Monk's criminal connections, confronted him about his family history. Mr. Brownlow disclosed that Monks was Oliver's half-brother, sharing the same father but not the same mother. Monk's mother had left their father, who later fell in love with a woman named Agnes. Before going to Rome for work, the father made a new will in favor of Agnes and her child, Oliver. In Rome, he fell ill and died, while Monk's mother discovered the will, burnt it, and stole Agnes's ring. Mr. Brownlow accused Monks of obtaining the ring from Mr. and Mrs. Bumble and discarding it into the river. Monks, overwhelmed by the revelations, was confronted with further accusations regarding Nancy's death. Mr. Brownlow presented a document that revealed the truth about Oliver and his father's will, returning Oliver's rightful inheritance. In exchange for signing the document and confessing, Mr. Brownlow agreed to spare Monks from police involvement. Fearing the consequences, Monks eventually signed the document, and Mr. Brownlow allowed him to go free. The police apprehended Fagan and incarcerated him, while Charlie Bates and Toby Crackit managed to escape, finding refuge in an old house on Jacob's Island, a dilapidated and impoverished area in the Thames. An atmosphere of fear enveloped them as they contemplated the dangers that loomed, with Fagan imprisoned and the authorities actively seeking Sykes. However, Sykes, seeking refuge in their hideout, abruptly arrived, prompting a confrontation. Charlie Bates accused Sykes of murdering Nancy, and a tense moment ensued. As the situation escalated, voices outside signaled the arrival of an angry mob with torches. Recognizing Sykes, they deemed him the murderer and sought to capture him. In an attempt to escape, Sykes, with Toby Crackit's assistance, climbed onto the roof with a rope. However, the dark night worked against him, and he lost his balance, plummeting to the street below, resulting in his demise. The tale concludes with the resolution of various characters' fates. Fagan faced the gallows for his crimes, while Charlie Bates embraced a new and honest life, working in the countryside. Monks ventured to America, where he met his end in prison. Mr. and Mrs. Bumble, once affluent, fell into poverty, residing in a workhouse. Mr. Brownlow adopted Oliver, and together with Mrs. Bedwin, they found happiness in a charming country home near the Maylies. Dr. Losburn also joined the community by purchasing a house nearby. As Oliver grew, Mr. Brownlow became his mentor, imparting valuable lessons. Oliver cherished his newfound family and, after enduring various adventures, finally discovered genuine friendship and a comforting home. The narrative concludes with Oliver experiencing the joy of a loving family, true friends, and the warmth of a secure home.